And I meant what I said. I've never been back inside. Anything that's anything that's there, it's yours. I don't want it. Don't send me anything. I want nothing. I literally felt like an abuse, an abused person who was running for her life. I'm grabbing everything I can and I'm out of here. The only difference was I was actually broadcasting from home. So I didn't want any of the past. I didn't want anything. I'm like, keep the pens, the pencils, whatever's there, it's yours. I don't want it. I need to start my life over. And so has it been easy? Absolutely not. But it was the best decision for me because so many great things have happened as a result of that. And the number one thing is just having freedom and peace of mind and not waking up. I mean, for the first time, I used to say my shoulders are down, and I don't even know if people recognize that your body tells you what how you feel and what's really going on internally, even though we're trying to hide it. I didn't realize that. I kept saying all the time, I'm like, babe, I need a massage. I need a massage. And I was always going to get massages because I would always have a lot of stress in my neck. And after about a week of not being there, knowing that I'm like, I'm done, I literally started feeling my shoulders go down. And so now I have this phrase like my shoulders are down. Like my shoulders are finally down because I was carrying around so much tension in my neck and in my shoulders. And I never want to feel like that ever again, ever. And so, yeah, so now I'm in this stage in my life where I kept thinking to myself, I know beyond a shadow of a doubt that I'm not the only one in this world who is dealing with this. And when I began to speak about my experience in doing some more research about what is this, it really began when I started seeing a therapist because I didn't understand what I was going through. I kept going, okay, this is happening at the office, but I'm feeling like this. But why am I feeling like this? And then I talked to my husband, or my mom and dad, or my sister, or my in-laws, and we'd always kind of try to navigate around it and go, oh, well, it's this reason, or maybe you could do this, or maybe you could do that. And then it just hit me over and over and over again. I'm like, well, the hits keep coming. Why do the hits keep coming? And why am I constantly asking for help? And the powers that be are literally ignoring me. And not being seen and heard is just as bad as putting a knife in my back. That's what
Ooh.
that I felt like I was literally being emotionally murdered. And so there was a huge incident that took place. And because of it, I told my husband one night, I said, honey, I said, I'm literally dying. I said, I don't know what to do. I said, I got to go talk to someone. And my mom and dad are both pastors. I was a PK, grew up in the church all my life. And as much as we were like, just pray about it, we were always praying. I kept saying, well, I know God hears me and sees my cries. But I just kept saying, "But why does this keep happening? Why is it that no matter what I do, no matter how professional I am, no matter what I do internally to make other people feel comfortable with me, no matter what I did, nothing was ever good enough. I never felt as if I was getting what I needed. I wasn't being valued. I wasn't being heard. And I was continuing to be marginalized by the news director and other people and coworkers. And I just said, this is not, I'm not living anymore. I was spending so much time talking about it to the point where I look back now and I realize that I missed a number of years of my son's life because I was so embroiled with trying to navigate the workplace. But I remember telling my husband, I said, I need to see someone. And so it took me a while before I finally found the right person. The first two people were not people of color. The second person was, I'm sorry, the first person was not. The second person was, but they were not Black. They were another culture, another background. And even that, I say all the time, just because you're a person of color doesn't mean that you understand if you've never been through that experience before. And I think there's this misnomer that, oh, well, you're a person of color. So that means you know. Well, not everyone has walked this walk, and not everyone is equipped with the right kind of information, education, and awareness. And I've learned that a lot of it comes from people's own personal perspectives and their own personal experiences. And so, yeah, if they've never in their own minds experienced it, so to them, they would go, well, what are you talking about? Which is what I got the second time around. And I kept praying and I said, Lord, I need to find someone. And I just did some more Google searching. and I can't even remember how this woman's name came up, but it did. And she was in an office not actually far from the station. So I made an appointment, and I was concerned too because I'm like, okay, I'm gonna walk in. She's gonna be, oh, you're the TV lady, and I'm like, oh, and I gotta, I was concerned that I would not be heard and listened. And this is what I know it's God. She has a condition where she will see you, but she doesn't there's a lack of recognition, and I forgot exactly what the disability is, but she doesn't recognize people's faces. She sees you, but the recognition of knowing that, okay, that's Nikki, she would see you the next day and go, okay, you are who? Because the facial recognition doesn't exist. So when I saw her, she didn't even know who I was. She had no idea, which was a blessing for me because I needed to be in a place that was safe, and I needed to be in a place where I could speak with someone openly and honestly without all of the other celebrity stuff that people assign to it because I didn't need that, didn't want it. I'm just a regular woman who wants to work and who wants to be happy, but I need help navigating this moment. And when when I started telling her just a few of the things, when she asked me why I was here, she literally stopped. She moved to the left, grabbed the tissue, she said, "Hold on a moment." She started wiping her face and started crying, and I was already in tears, but she started crying with me, and she said, "I'm so sorry you're going through this." She said, "What you are experiencing." She goes, "Well, first thing she said is, 'What you're telling me, you should be dead.'" I'll never forget that. She said, "I am so happy you're here because what you're telling me, you should be dead." And when she said that, literally there was an effort, like my shoulders were finally down again. And there was a moment of affirmation because I thought I was going crazy. I literally thought I was going crazy. And I kept telling Archie, it was like, something's going on. And I said, I don't know what this is, and I can't pinpoint it. I said, I know it's something. It's here. There's something going on. And when she said that to me, literally, I finally felt affirmed that what I was going through was real. And then as we kept talking and working through all of these issues and problems, she said, "What you're going through," I think this is like the third or fourth time, "is classic workplace abuse." And when she said workplace abuse, when she said abuse, I went, whew. It literally was like a light bulb moment for me. I went, oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay. And it all began to make sense. It all began to make sense, whereas the gaslighting, the manipulation, telling you you're not really great, but you really are, but you're not, but you are, like, it changed from day to day to day. It was literally classic abuse, and that's when I said, "Okay, okay." So it took me another year and a half to keep working with her and working through all these issues, but that was the beginning of my realization that it was abuse. And then what are we going to do about it? Because it wasn't going to change. I could tell the environment wasn't going to change. But it began the work for me, the journey of becoming strong and courageous, if you will, and brave to say, I see what you're doing. By that point, and I think that cancer probably has a lot to do with it. Like when you go through a kind of a health challenge like that, there's very little you're afraid of after that. I'm like, whatever. Like, I'm not afraid of anybody. I'm not afraid of anything. And I'm really going to speak my mind because I only have one life. This is it. I got one chance to get this done and to get it right and to live the kind of life that I want to live. And so when she told me that, that was the beginning of my journey of working through it emotionally, spiritually, and really mentally because my mental health had really, really suffered. And imagine going through all of this, but you're on TV every single day. I mean, my mom and dad, they're like, you should have won an Oscar because people would never know that that's what you were going through. And so I know when I finally came out and told everybody what was happening, it was a shock to a lot of people because they see me happy, but they don't see me at home. They don't hear the conversations that I'm having with my husband. They don't hear the conversations that I'm having with my mom and dad on my way home every night on the cell phone. They don't see the crying. They don't know all of the crazy, manipulative games that were being played behind the scenes and in front of my face. I always had to hold it in and pretend that everything is okay. And I just was exhausted. I was tired, and I just couldn't do it anymore. And so June 5th, 2020, I'll never forget it. It was the day that I literally got my life back. I got my life back on June 5th, 2020. So I celebrate that day, which actually happens to also be my dad's birthday. So I celebrate that day for him, but I also celebrate it as my day of liberation and day of freedom. And once you get that taste, you never go back. You never go back. You can never go back. So I'm so much more inclined to understand when I meet people or see people or, there's I have conversations with them. I can tell whether or not they're a right fit for me. And, there've been a couple of job opportunities that have come my way. And I've clearly been like, now, could I use the money? Absolutely. Do I have a job? I want a job? Absolutely. But there have been times when I'm like, okay, this ain't gonna work for me. Like I can already see the kind of person who you are, whether it's a narcissist or whatever. Like I can tell that this is the same environment that I used to work in. And so for my sanity, I'd rather have less in life, but have more joy and peace and love and freedom. There's nothing, we can't take any of this stuff with us. I'm willing to give it all up. I've given up a lot and still giving up a lot. But I wake up every morning going, yeah, but it's my life, and I get to choose what I do today. I get to choose what I do, who I work with, what I do, where I go. I don't have anyone micromanaging me and telling me what I have to do, or telling me that you're not going to get a raise, or asking for, or trying to be a good girl so that you'll give me more money. Like, I don't have to do any of that. And that does come with a price. I mean, the price of less income, um, the price of, being blackballed in the industry, the price that I've paid of, my livelihood has dramatically changed, but I wouldn't give it up for anything in the world. My son is happier, my husband is happier, we're happier. I mean, it did a number on our family for a long while, and it's been a long time to get out from under it. So that's why I speak out. That's why I'm an advocate, because I know that I'm not the only one. And I know I'm not the only one now because of people like you who I've met around the world. Um, as soon as I made the announcement about the lawsuit against the station, I kept receiving emails from really hundreds of people who have either been in a situation like that or knew some of the people that I was talking about, or even used to work there who were like, thank you for speaking up. I was also victimized, but I didn't know what to do. And I left. I just left and walked away. And that's not right. We shouldn't allow the bullies to continue to thrive. Why are they the ones still allowed to thrive? We got to flip that. We got to change it. And so that's what I've dedicated my life to. God said, "Okay, you made a promise. I made a promise, and I need you to do this for me." And I've never had a feeling of I shouldn't. I have the feeling that it's my responsibility. I have to. I have to. People ask me all the time, "What's the biggest story you've ever done in your career?" And I'm like, "Oh, could it be when I went to the Olympics in Australia for a month back in 2000? Yeah, that was a good one. Was it my trip to Kenya, to Eldoret, Kenya, where I was there for 2.5, 3 weeks doing, a documentary on the Indiana University and the AIDS epidemic and their partnership? Yeah, that was good. Was it interviewing Joe Biden? Yeah, yeah, that's pretty cool. Oh, First Lady, Michelle Obama, President Barack Obama, was it that? Yeah, I mean, I could say that, sure. But people would always ask me, and I would never give them an answer. I'm like, you know what? I've done so much. I said, I can't really put it a number one and number two because I believe that everyone's story is important. So I would never say anything. I'm like, I've had great experiences, but I would never tell people what my number one story was. Well, for the first time in my life, I can honestly say the number one story in my life is my story.
Oh, yes.
It's my story. I'm about to cry thinking about it. Like it's my story. So all of these years, I've never been able to tell my story. And now, still as a journalist, but as a private citizen, I can finally say this is the biggest story of my career, of my life. Yeah, it was cool meeting the president, first lady. I've interviewed them several times. But all of that pales in comparison to my story because my story, I hope and pray, is opening the conversation about workplace bullying even more so. Seeing people being able to see me and say, well, if it can happen to her, this can happen to anybody, which it does, and it does happen to everybody and anybody. No one is immune. And if I can use this platform to help bring awareness, education, but I'm also about solutions. I don't want to be that person who's just like, well, it was me and this happened to me. I could talk about those stories until the cows come home. But for me, what's important is to have these conversations so that people understand that one, that you're not alone, you're not crazy, it's very real. And two, create a collective, to be part of a collective, if you will, of people who've been through this, who are willing to say, me too. It happened to me too. And we are about the business of helping to improve laws, to change laws, to improve humanity, to make it better for everyone so that everyone has the right to thrive in the workplace. And so that's where I am in my life. It's been a lot of um, it's been a lot of work, but it's the kind of work that is satisfying. And while it is a journey, it's like I do see the possibility of the Workplace Psychological Safety Act actually being implemented and passed. I mean, we have 2 states down, 1 state, Massachusetts, it's almost there. Rhode Island is second. And it's been so encouraging seeing the hundreds of people around the country here in the US who are joining forces in our various states, and we're all collectively working, but also individually working in our respective states to pass this legislation with our state legislature. And I believe it's going to happen. I know it's going to happen. And if it's the only thing that I do for the rest of my life, it's the only thing that I will do for the rest of my life because it's that important. It's that important. I this is what living is all about. It's not just receiving and taking, it's about giving. And I just know that God really prepared me for this moment. The cancer prepared me for this moment. And I am literally living my better than best life, a life that I always knew existed and have been yearning for. And I'm finally there, finally there. I could talk all day, girl. I'm sorry. But
Oh, no, no, we are not
really give
apologizing.
you
I
yeah.
can I can sit here and listen to you all day. You have a way with words, and I can always tell how much someone has been through sometimes through how they relay their story. You speak with such passion and conviction, and from as someone who has been through a lot as well, who has I often say there's sometimes a threshold of suffering that once you cross,
Mhm.
you just know when someone has crossed it, and it
Yep.
shows up in how they approach life. And I can see that in you. I can see that fire in you and that
Oh,
fierceness when you've been to the bottom of the bottom and you've fought your way back up, and God has been with you through that journey. You're unstoppable after that. And so I see that light and fire in you, and I admire it. And thank you so much for sharing those very, very difficult experiences, and for not just sharing it with me, not just sharing it with the Bounce Black pod, but sharing it with the world, because you decided that what you went through was so horrific that you want to do your part so that no one else has to go through it. And you made a bold declaration that your silence is not for sale.
it is
And
not for sale.
and
And let me, and some people may not understand where that came from. As a writer, I had to announce that I finally dropped the lawsuit. So I was given the right to sue in federal court, and I sued the company. It was a major TV, major media company here in the U.S., one of the largest ones in the nation, if not the world. And I decided that what happened to me wasn't fair, and so I filed a federal discrimination lawsuit. What they don't tell you, and this is one of the things that I really want people to understand, and what I've been sharing on my podcast, is that, while the discrimination laws technically are on the book, They really don't protect us. They just simply don't. Here in the US, we're still dealing with and working with the 1964 Civil Rights Act. And for racial discrimination, the only way to prove it is they called you the N word or they left the noose on your desk. Go figure. But all of these other things that we all know are racist and are part of systemic racism and oppression, the laws have not been kept up to date. They're not. And so there is no protection. So knowing that, as we were going through the settlement process after the depositions of four of the main characters with the company, there could have been others, but of course we were not at a court. We were not in court. We had not gotten permission, if you will, or granted permission by the judge for this to actually go to court. Um, I was in at a crossroads. The question was, if they offer a settlement, which they did, we all know that you sign off on it, you take the money, you sign an NDA, non-disclosure agreement, you promise to never talk about it again, and you ride off into the sunset. The Thursday before the Monday that we were supposed to give our yes or no by 12:30 p.m., I went for a walk. I told Archie, I was like, it's just so much because my attorney was on the phone with me. I was like, it's just so much. I said, let me just take a walk. I just need to take a walk and just pray, which is what I did. And I never will forget. I walked, I was about 2 blocks up, and before I crossed over to the other street, literally, I just said, Lord, what do you want me to do? I said, I don't know. I said, Lord, I need you to talk to me. I need you to tell me what I should do. And he audibly said, don't sign it. Literally said, don't sign it. So I finished my walk. I'm crying. I'm praying. I'm crying. I'm praying. I'm crying, going, what do you mean? Don't sign it. I got back home. Archie was here. And I told him, I said, are you ready for this? He was like, what? I go, God told me not to sign it. And he was like, what are you talking about? I said, God told me not to sign it. And as you could imagine, it was quiet. He was like, what do you mean? I said, God told me not to sign it. Called my mom and dad, told them, called our in-law, we told the whole family. And they were all like, well, I mean, well, what was the point? And I said, I can't tell you guys why. All I'm telling you is I'm being obedient. And I know that God literally said, don't sign it. Something good is going to come from it. So when you're in the middle of a case like that, you're like, well, if they're offering you a settlement, isn't that the whole point? And I keep telling people, as a journalist, my whole point of filing the lawsuit, so because I really naively thought that the truth of what I went through would come out. I wanted people to know. I wanted those people to be paraded into the courtroom, raise their right hand, put their left hand on the Bible, raise their right hand, and to swear to tell the truth. And I wanted them to be under the microscope, and to be, watched by a jury and to hear the nonsense. Now I'm getting upset again. To hear the lies and the nonsense and the gaslighting. Because what you're not going to do is, one, lie about my work ethic, which is stellar. You're not going to do that. No, I'm not going to allow you to use that lie as a narrative to justify why you treated me the way you treated me. I'm not going to do that. So there was a part of me that had to sit back and go, so if we're not going to go to trial, so that everybody, because I wanted viewers and people to know what really was going on, because by that, I hadn't really been able to say very much. I wanted people to know the truth. I wanted people to know the truth. That was it. I just wanted people to know the truth. I wanted them to know what happened, why I left, and how pervasive the abuse was. And when I realized that it was never going to happen, because both sides had to write their last kind of proposal, not proposal, but their summary judgment. The reason why the case should be dismissed, or I accept the settlement and life goes on, no harm, no foul, whatever. And it just wasn't enough for me, meaning not the money, the idea that I would just take money and walk away and not be able to ever talk about it, or to tell the truth, or to tell people that the systemic racism had been going on for 15 years, even prior to the last 2, 3 years I had been there. The majority of it was really happening. The most horrendous part was near the end, but I needed to explain the trajectory of the racism along my entire tenure there. I needed to explain to people why I didn't get the 5 or the 6 o'clock show back in 2004 and 5. I needed to explain all of these moments along the way so they could understand the aggregate of the systemic racism, the aggregate of the experiences, because that is what made me exhausted, holding it in and not being able to speak to it and about it to the right people because they weren't going to do anything. And I knew I kind of had my place. I couldn't talk about it. I really couldn't say anything. I couldn't really complain. And again, the cancer got me to the place where I was like, what are you going to do? Like, I'm just going to keep it real. Like, I see you. What you're doing right now is harassment. I said it. Now what you going to do? Like, let's be real. Let's keep it 100, as the kids say. Let's be real, because I was just so exhausted of playing the mind game with people. So that's where I am in my life. It's like, hey, I want to help everybody understand that it's a game. I want everybody to understand that the laws don't protect you. I want you to know what you need to make sure that you save. I want you to understand the kind of evidence you need. And even absent, even with all of the evidence, it still isn't sometimes enough. And so you still might have to walk away with either accepting a settlement or nothing. And if you walk away with a settlement, will you still be happy? Will that make you happy? No, for me, I just wanted to do my job. I just wanted to do my job. I here's the I tell people, here's the truth. If they had done what they were supposed to have done, which is to hold people accountable, to make sure that people who were in management positions were either demoted or suspended or fired for the egregious behaviors, I would still be there because I love my job. I didn't want to leave. I didn't want to leave, but I had to leave. I was forced to leave. I could not continue to work there without changes. So when you tell me you're not going to change, then what am I supposed to do? I'm not going to sit there and stay there and continue to work. You left me no choice but to walk away. But again, it was meant for me to walk away. God made it, they made it bad enough for me for for me to listen to God who said, trust me. So my silence is not for sale was born out of that walk, meaning my silence, there's no amount of money that you could ever pay me that will stop me from speaking the truth and telling people what really happened so that it can help other people. And so that's what I mean by my silence is not for sale. You're not going to buy me. You're not going to pay enough. There's never enough money that you can pay me to keep me from speaking the truth. And I keep telling folks, I'm like, did y'all forget that I was a journalist? That's what we're here for. We're here to hold companies and institutions accountable, to speak truth to power. That's what we do. That's what I've been doing for 35 years. So for me to walk away and go, all right, I'll just sign this. And I'm not saying that if that's what someone else does, that is your prerogative because everyone's situation is different. But for me, that moment meant I needed to walk away. And I needed to walk away with my head held high and to speak truth about what really happened. Because that truth is a part of setting yourself free. That's part of the healing journey as well, is being able to finally say it, to finally speak it. Like that is just the most amazing feeling in the world. And so again, once you feel that, you don't ever go back. I will never go back to not being who I am. I will never go back to not being authentic. I will never go back to not speaking my truth in the moment, not waiting until I get home to tell Archie. And then he goes, why didn't you say that? Like, how many times we've had those moments? I'm like, I should have said, if I had just said, dang it, I should have said, I wanted to, no more shoulda, woulda, coulda have. I am in the moment girl. If I feel it, I'm going to tell you. And so it's been amazing. My husband says you've really changed a lot. And I don't think I've changed a lot. I think I'm just so much more clear about what I want and what I don't want, what I will tolerate, what I don't accept. And I tell people straight out, like, I'm just very honest in that moment. I'm not a nasty person by any stretch of the imagination, but I'm also very clear about who I am, my values, what's important to me, and how I want to be treated. Period. If you treat me with kindness and respect, I always come there. But as soon as you begin to deviate from that, that's when I go, okay, okay, I see you. And I in my mind, kind of have a game plan for what my next move is going to be because life is too short for me to be caught up with in situations that do not honor who I am as a person.
Wow, that's so powerful. Oh my goodness, so many gems there. And I definitely know that listeners are going to learn so much from you. And absolutely, I can even say, as someone who did settle my own workplace bullying case, it was circumstantial. I was just so worn out and I kind of just wanted to move on with my life. But what I did was I refused to be gagged entirely. So I
Yeah.
only agreed not to name names, but I
Mhm.
refused to let them shut me up. I
That's
refused
it.
let them rob me
Yeah.
of my calling because that's what I do. You knew who I was coming into this job. You knew what I speak about publicly. So you've
Mhm.
picked the wrong person
Yeah.
to mess about in the workplace and think that you can keep them quiet about it. I'm not that person. And so
I know. Yeah.
absolutely with you. Speaking truth to power is very important because at the end of the day, we are all going to stand before God. And there's
Mhm.
so much in the Bible about, speaking up for what's right. And if you see
Yeah.
something wrong and you don't say anything, blood is on your hands and you're going to be held accountable for the evil that you witness and don't challenge. So absolutely, I'm completely on board with you there. And I guess just to kind of bring everything full circle as we wrap up, I
Mhm.
want to hear your perspective on, as you look back over your journey and your life experiences, what do you have to say and what wisdom do you have to impart to maybe up and coming Black journalists or victims of workplace bullying? Perhaps those are two separate
Yeah.
audiences with different messages, but go ahead.
Yeah, what I would say to up and coming journalists, and it's interesting. When I was in college, this was back in 1990. I think I wrote this in 1990. I wrote a thesis paper, and it was basically talking about the importance of having African Americans in front of the camera, which was really relegated back in the civil rights movement when a lot of people who looked like us were not covering the issues of the civil rights movement. So that was when the Kerner Commission report came out, and it was saying that we need to make sure that we have people of color who were telling these stories. So I thought, okay, that's great. All right. So here I am in 1990, 91, and I'm watching television in Washington, D.C., and I'm seeing all these beautiful Black faces on television, which was great because I'm like, I'm one of them. And if they could do it, so can I. They were such role models, they were role models in my head, if you will. And yet I thought, well, the power is really behind the scenes. And I realized that because I was an intern for ABC back in the day, and it was with Ted Koppel. He was this huge celebrity interviewer journalist for ABC back in the day. And so I interned with him for a semester. And I realized that even though he was in front of the camera, he had his own production company, Ted Koppel Productions. And that production company is, they're the ones who, especially the executive producer, they were deciding the storyline, how the story is being told. I mean, they're the ones who are really in control and in power. So I did my entire thesis around that, saying, oh, it's great to be a reporter. It's great to be an anchor. It's great to be that person out there in the field. But it's also more important for us to be behind the scenes in positions of power and control because they're the ones who are managing the day to day business of the newsroom. They're the ones who are deciding many of the major decisions that really, as viewers, we are relegated to because of their decisions. So if you have people who don't look like us, if you only have one group and they're all sitting at the table making these decisions, why would they think about including my perspective or my opinion or someone from my community? Because guess what? 9 times out of 10, they don't interact with us outside of maybe the workplace. And so that means that there's going to be a void in the opinions, in the storytelling, in everything. And
Yep.
so then as I've gotten older, you begin to understand how vital, how important, the important role that media plays. And so if the only stories that we're seeing of African Americans on the news every day is about a shooting, but we don't see the story of the African American or just say the Black person, the person of color who has done something that's inspirational. If we don't see, if there's not a nice mix of the two, then someone's perception of us is only going to be what they see on television, which is, oh, all they're doing is committing crimes and all of that stuff. And so I began to, over time, understand, even though I did that in college, there was something that I kind of keenly was aware of, and that is power. The power is not in the reporter or the anchor. People think that the power is in those positions of management, the news directors, the producers, the executive producers, the general managers, the promotions department, all of those people who play a role. And if those people don't look like us, if we're not at the table, we're literally not being fed. If we're not at the table, we can't even be at the table to even serve to the person who's sitting to the left or to the right of us. If we're not at the table, if we're not even at the table, we're likely not even in the room. And if we're not in the room, then your opinion, your belief, your perspective is not taken into account. And that is wrong. We have to be intentional about diversity and equity and inclusion. We have to be. And I'm living here in the state of Florida, and we have a governor who is trying to do away with all things DEI. A lot of companies in the nation are now getting rid of DEI. Like, it was great. It was performative when it happened during George Floyd. All of a sudden it was like, we're in this together and we're gonna get DEI. We want to make sure that we're, and now all of a sudden they're like, no, we don't need it, which means that you really weren't committed to that. You just did it because you wanted to pacify us and think that, oh, we got a DEI person now who's a person of color. So that means, yeah, we're making things happen. It was performative. It was not meant to really be. Here's I'm gonna just say this. DEI is not for us. It's really for them. They're the ones who need to do their work.
Yep.
They're the ones who need to do the work. I'm not supposed to be teaching you what it is. You need to do the work. I can tell you what racism is, but at the end of the day, you need to look at the man and or the woman in the mirror and ask yourself, have you ever been complicit in making sure that someone who doesn't look like you doesn't get a fair chance?
Whew.
9 times out of 10, maybe unconscious, but I like to call it conscious bias, because bias and prejudice, they're real. And people, especially when you're older, you know exactly what you're doing. And you know the motivation behind why you're doing it. You may not want to vocalize it, because to vocalize it and to say, oh, I'm being racist, I'm sure that hurt. And they'd be like, I'm not being racist. I get it. But the
Oh,
bottom line is somebody is. A lot of people are. We're all not having these experiences just because. We're not
mm,
having these experiences. They're not just happening to us just because. I mean, that would be very, it's a coincidence that it's all happening to people of color. But it's also, what's happening is we're not speaking up, and we talk about it to each other, but we don't say it to the people who need to know the truth. And that's what I'm about now, is speaking about the truth of how it harms us, how the disparate treatment kills us, how people are dying because of it. And I am not going to allow my life and this experience to be such that I don't talk about it, so that I can help save other people, so that we can stop having. I think we're going to always have to have these conversations because we're human beings, but we have to do our work. We have to be open to doing our work. We have to make sure that these so-called, back in the day they were freedom riders, but people who are allies, that they're doing their work and that they're holding people who look like them accountable as well. It takes all of us. We can't be the ones trying to have you hold you accountable all the time. You have to do your work. You also have to make sure that you're not being complicit by being silent, that
mm,
you are part of the solution, that you're holding people up. And if you see something and hear something that is wrong, even when it's done by your person who looks like you in that boardroom, you need to say, what you just said was wrong. What you just did was wrong. How you treated that person is wrong. That's what we need to do. We need to all be holding each other accountable about every and any issue, not just about racism. But what I'm not going to do is spend my life trying to teach you. So what I'm going to do is to tell people and teach people what not to do, so they can avoid, perhaps, being in a situation like this, or at least learn ways in which they can protect themselves and to be safe in a work environment, and what they can do for themselves and their families. But what I'm not going to do is spend my time trying to teach other people how to be anti-racist. That's your job, not my job.
wow. Absolutely,
I think
absolutely, absolutely. And so I guess the last question would be, what words do you have to give to those who've experienced
right.
toxicity in the workplace?
Right. So for the journalists, it's, don't just be in front of the camera, be in positions of management and power. And for people who've been through workplace abuse is to, one, understand that you're not crazy. This is very, very real. Two, make sure that you have a great supportive environment, whether it's family and friends, people who you really can trust, who create that safe place for you so that you can speak about what you're going through and to feel as if you're being supported. And number three, what I have learned is that therapy is okay. A lot of us, people of color, sometimes from a historical, cultural perspective, we typically either haven't had the financial wherewithal and or the access, or culturally speaking, we are like, just go to church and pray. We can pray and also get therapy as well. And
Yes.
so the two can go hand in hand. God gave them the mind, the intelligence, the wherewithal, and we can combine both prayer as well as prayer, faith, as well as therapy. And those three things together can help us heal. And so those would be my top three things is to know that you're not alone, to not be silent, and to, to always be able to, speak to a therapist and someone who can help you work through it because it is a journey. I'm still going through it. It's still a journey. It probably will always be with me. So I'm just now at a point in my life where I'm trying to learn how to navigate it and to manage it. But the trauma is real, but it doesn't hurt as much as it did before. And the more days that continue to go ahead of me, that means I'm getting closer and closer to the days of when it happened. They're farther, and behind me, and that's a good thing. I wake up every morning going, okay, what's going to happen today? Some days are good and some days aren't. It just depends. But I'm still grateful for the decision that I made. And I'll just end with this. When I knew I made the right decision when this time last year I picked up my son from school. He was going to school in Indianapolis and we moved to Florida because we needed to just kind of get out of Indy and to be in a new environment. And he came down for during the summer of 2020 and he was at a basketball camp and he was there. And at about 3 days into a 2 week stint, they gave us a call and said, hey, your son's really, really good. We'd like for him to come to school here. And we were like, all right. We're like, how's that going to work out? So anyway, we made the decision. We prayed about it. We decided to go ahead and take the chance and come on down. We did. I still haven't been working since I left, but we came down and this day, he had already been there for about a year and a half. And so last year, he came when he was an eighth grader. He was a ninth grader last year, and he's a 10th grader now. So he's been here for 3 years. But last year, in his ninth grade year in the spring, we were driving, picked him up from school, and he's in the car. And I just look over at him. I'm like, Ian, I'm just so proud of you. I said, I'm so proud of how you've been navigating, moving from Indy, and we're now here in Florida. You're doing so well in school. He's on the honor roll. He's just made the National Honor Society. Like he's just really thriving. I said, I'm just so happy for you. I said, mommy's so proud of you. And he goes, can I tell you something? I go, yeah, sure. So I'm like, okay, what's he about to tell me? He goes, well, my decision to come to school here was 30% me and 70% you. I said, what do you mean? He goes, well, 30% was for me. He goes, I did want to come. He goes, but the 70% was for you. And I said, well, what do you mean by that? He goes, because I knew that you were unhappy at your job. I knew you were unhappy. I knew that you had been going through a lot. And I knew that you loved Florida and that you loved the beach so much. And you were always happy. Whenever we came down here to visit on vacations, you were always so happy. And I wanted you to be happy again.
Oh.
And I sat there and I'm driving and I'd never forget, I was getting ready to get onto 75. I was making that right turn and going around the loop. And I was like, oh my God. So I'm holding the steering wheel going, oh my God. Oh my God. And I just started crying and I couldn't stop. I was just like convulsing almost because I realized at that moment that I did make the right decision. I
Yeah.
made the right decision. But the fact that my son, as an eighth grader, knew that his mother was hurting and knew that he wanted to save me because to save me would be to save our family. I'll never, ever forget that moment. So when I do what I do it because I know there's so many other families who are going through so much right now because going through workplace abuse is devastating, not just for the victim, but the entire family is victimized.
Mhm.
And to know that he made the decision But for his decision, we probably will still be there. But for his decision, we're now living a life that we always wanted. But I would never, and I tell people all the time, just as much as we think that we're protecting our kids from this or even our family members, they know, they feel it, they sense it. And so that was the beginning of my realization last year, this time last year, that I did indeed make the right decision and I would do it all over again. Meeting you and meeting other women and men who send me emails of all races and backgrounds all over the world who say, thank you for speaking up. It does. It takes all of us speaking up.
Mm.
And I never considered myself to be necessarily an advocate for anything. I was just kind of going through life, living my life, doing my thing. But if there's ever a time that I should be an advocate for anything, it's this one. And again, it goes back to, this is the biggest story of my life. It's the biggest story of my life that I want to continue to share and to help expose the truth, but also help heal. Because we can all do this. There's a solution. It's not like we don't have a solution for it. It's just called being intentional about living a life of kindness and compassion and really being together and not just to say it, but to live it and to act it out on a daily basis. Are we going to always get it right? No. But when we don't get it right, be man enough, woman enough to say, I'm sorry, I apologize, I'm going to do better. Because God is a God of second chances and third chances and fourth chances. And I want to be able to extend a chance to everyone so that we all can learn and grow. And that's what this is about. That's what this is about. It's about being intentional, about growing, being invested in growing, and being interested in growing and helping one another grow. And I think if we do that, if we start with that premise, there's nothing we can't do together.
Woo! Andrea Morehead, everyone. Oh my goodness. Okay, I'm sure everyone listening is going to be wondering, how can they keep up with you? Where can they find you? How
Oh,
can they
yeah.
follow your story and your journey?
Yeah, Twitter is Andrea_Morehead, Morehead. Facebook is Andrea Morehead. I also have My Silence Is Not for Sale. So if you just type in My Silence Is Not for Sale, it will come up on TikTok, on Instagram. Twitter is silence not for the number four sale, but everything you can find me that way. And Instagram is My Silence Is Not for Sale and Andrea WTHI. Unfortunately, I still have those last four letters behind my name because it was the station that I used to be with. And for some reason, Instagram, after all this time, will not let me change it. And I keep asking, but I think it's because the company is still tied to it somehow because they were the ones who got us verified. So I can't change it. So I tell people that the WTHR now stands for wisdom, truth, honesty, and respect. There you go.
Ooh.
And they're all the three things that we should stand for and that are so appropriate as we talk about workplace abuse and just humanity. It's, wisdom. Have the wisdom to walk away when it's time to walk away. Be truthful. Let's just be truthful, be honest about who we are, honor ourselves, and respect ourselves. And that's what it's all about.
Am-
Wisdom, truth, honor, and respect.
Amazing. Thank you
You're
so much,
you're
Andrea.
so welcome.
I could stand up and give you a
Give me a
standing
virtual hug.
ovation.
Give me a hug.
A pleasure and an honor
My
getting to know you and your story and getting to interact with you. I'm honestly so in awe of who you are and what you stand for. And I just pray that God continues to heal you and use you because, as you said, you're doing the Lord's work.
The
So
Lord's work. And so are you. So are you. So happy to have met you. I know we're going to be connected forever. And that's what's been so beautiful about this. I've met so many wonderful people. And I'm excited to continue to connect and collaborate and to work with people. And, I know that we're going to still, like I said, be connected forever. And so let's get busy. I'm going to come to London. We're going to do some work
do
together.
it. Let's do it. And you know what? Funny story. I love Florida too. And my family, most of my family are out there. So I you should
Really?
probably see
What
me.
part? Where are they?
So I've got family in Gainesville, Orlando,
Oh,
Tampa. Yeah, we're spread out.
You gotta come because 'cause we're just south of Tampa. We're just south of
Okay.
Tampa.
Okay,
Yep,
I'll let you know when I'm next there. I was last in November, so I'll let you know.
that'd be wonderful. That'd be
Amazing.
so wonderful. If I don't get to London before you come here.
Yes, yes. We're waiting for you. Oh, but thank you so much,
So
honestly.
welcome. You're so welcome. I can literally sit here and talk to you all night long. I mean, it's so important. It's such an important topic. And, like I said earlier, it's beginning to really take shape. A lot of people are jumping on board. And I think the time is now. I think the movement, the people who started this was 10 years ago. And they're like, finally, people are beginning to jump on board, like they're getting it and more conversation. And I think the more that we keep talking, the more people will jump on board as well and get on the bandwagon. I call it the bandwagon of good trouble, the good trouble bandwagon.
Ooh, I
Like
love it. Love it.
that's the bandwagon we want. I want to be on the good trouble
That's
bandwagon.
the right one. That's the right one. I love it.
Yep.
No.